Duration, 30 minutes. Tolvajärvi was just a name on a map. No grand city. No famous fortress. No political symbol anyone outside Finland recognized. Yet in December 1939, this frozen crossing became one of the most important pieces of ground in the entire Winter War. Because whoever controlled Tolvajärvi controlled movement, momentum, and morale. And neither side fully understood that, until it was almost too late. To understand why Tolvajärvi mattered, we must first understand how the Winter War was unfolding away from headlines and capital cities. By early December 1939, the Soviet invasion of Finland was already facing unexpected resistance. The Red Army had advanced along multiple fronts, pushing south toward Helsinki and east through the dense forests of Karelia. On paper, Soviet strategy was simple: advance quickly, break Finnish lines, force surrender before winter became unbearable. But Finland refused to fight the war the Soviet Union expected. Instead of defending every inch of ground, Finnish commanders focused on key points: roads, bridges, narrow crossings, places where numbers meant less and terrain meant everything. Tolvajärvi was one of those places. Eastern Finland was a world of forests and frozen lakes. Roads were rare, rail lines even rarer. Movement was slow, predictable, and vulnerable. Tolvajärvi sat at the junction of these fragile lifelines, a chain of lakes connected by narrow strips of land. One main road cutting through wilderness, a natural corridor that linked Soviet supply routes to deeper Finnish territory. If the Red Army pushed through Tolvajärvi, it could split Finnish forces in the region, threaten key defensive positions, and open a door to a broader collapse in eastern Finland. To Soviet planners, Tolvajärvi looked like an opportunity. To Finnish commanders, it looked like a knife pointed at the heart. The Soviet advance toward Tolvajärvi was part of a larger push by the 139th Rifle Division. Their mission was not subtle. Move fast, overwhelm resistance, exploit momentum. This was standard Red Army doctrine. Speed mattered more than caution. Aggression mattered more than flexibility. Doctrine mattered more than terrain. And doctrine said that Finnish forces were weak, fragmented, and nearing exhaustion. That belief shaped every decision that followed. As Soviet units moved westward, early encounters seemed to confirm their confidence. Finnish forces fell back from exposed positions. Villages were abandoned. Resistance appeared scattered. From a distance, it looked like collapse. But what Soviet commanders failed to see was that Finnish withdrawals were not panicked. They were deliberate. Finnish commanders understood something crucial. They could not stop the Red Army everywhere, so they chose where to fight. Tolvajärvi was one of those choices. By mid-December, Soviet columns were stretched thin along icy roads. Tanks and trucks moved in long, vulnerable lines. Supplies lagged behind advancing units. Communication between formations weakened with every kilometer. In normal conditions, this would have been dangerous. In Finnish winter conditions, it was catastrophic. Yet Soviet commanders pressed forward. They believed speed would compensate for risk. They believed Finnish resistance was breaking. They believed Tolvajärvi would fall easily. On the Finnish side, the situation was desperate. Manpower was limited. Ammunition was scarce. Every decision carried enormous weight. Finnish forces near Tolvajärvi were outnumbered and outgunned. Retreat was possible, but dangerous. If they gave up the crossing, they might never regain it. And losing it could unravel the entire eastern front. Finnish commanders faced a grim calculation: hold and risk destruction, or retreat and risk something worse. The terrain around Tolvajärvi favored neither comfort nor mercy. Frozen lakes offered open killing grounds. Forests limited visibility to meters. Roads became narrow corridors where movement was predictable and deadly. For Soviet forces dependent on vehicles and rigid formations, this was hostile ground. For Finnish troops on skis, it was familiar, but familiarity did not mean safety. Every movement risked exposure. Every engagement risked irreplaceable losses. As Soviet forces approached Tolvajärvi, skirmishes intensified. Finnish patrols probed Soviet positions. Ambushes disrupted supply convoys. Soviet units responded with artillery and air attacks, flattening suspected Finnish positions. Villages near the front vanished beneath shell fire. Civilians fled into forests and frozen fields, carrying what little they could. The war was no longer distant. It was everywhere. At Soviet headquarters, Tolvajärvi was still considered a secondary objective, a stepping stone, a place to pass through, not a place to fight. This assumption would prove disastrous. The Soviet command underestimated two things: the importance of the crossing, and the willingness of Finnish forces to gamble everything on holding it. Finnish leadership understood that Tolvajärvi was not just a tactical position, it was psychological. If the Red Army broke through here, it would confirm Soviet momentum and Finnish vulnerability. It would reinforce the belief, both inside Finland and abroad, that resistance was futile. If Finland could stop the advance here, even briefly, it could change the story of the war. Not win it, but redefine it. As December 12th approached, both sides prepared, without fully realizing what was coming. Soviet forces planned a continued advance. Finnish commanders planned something riskier, a counterstroke, not a retreat, not a defense, an attack. This decision marked a turning point in Finnish thinking. Until now, survival had meant delay and avoidance. At Tolvajärvi, survival would mean confrontation. The night before the confrontation was bitterly cold. Temperatures dropped further. Weapons froze. Breath crystallized in the air. Finnish soldiers prepared silently, aware that the coming hours could decide not just a battle, but the fate of an entire front. They knew they were outnumbered. They knew failure could be catastrophic. And still, they prepared to advance. What Soviet forces did not realize was that their confidence had become predictability. Their routes were known, their formations expected, their assumptions unchallenged. Tolvajärvi had lulled them into believing they were pushing against a retreating enemy. Instead, they were walking into a decision that would shatter that illusion. When fighting erupted around Tolvajärvi, it was sudden and violent. Finnish units struck where Soviet lines were weakest. Supply routes were cut. Forward units found themselves isolated. Confusion spread rapidly. Orders were delayed. Counterattacks collided with empty forest. Tanks advanced without infantry support. The crossing that was supposed to enable movement became a trap. Tolvajärvi transformed from a road into a battlefield, from a corridor into a chokepoint, from an opportunity into a crisis. As fighting intensified, the significance of Tolvajärvi became undeniable. Soviet commanders realized too late that losing control here meant losing coherence across the sector. Finnish commanders realized that their gamble was working. For the first time since the invasion began, the Red Army was not advancing. It was reacting. The consequences rippled outward. Soviet momentum stalled. Finnish morale surged. International observers took notice. Tolvajärvi was no longer just a frozen crossing. It was a symbol in the making. By the time the battle reached its climax, both sides understood the truth. This place mattered, not because of its size, but because of its timing. Tolvajärvi exposed the fault lines of the Winter War, between doctrine and reality, between numbers and adaptability, between confidence and understanding. It showed that the Red Army's greatest weakness was not lack of strength, but lack of imagination. And it showed that Finland's greatest weapon was not winter, but choice. The choice to fight where it mattered. The road to Tolvajärvi was paved with assumptions. The road away from it would be paved with consequences. Because what happened here would echo far beyond eastern Finland. It would shape how the Winter War was fought, how the Red Army reformed, and how the world judged Soviet power. Tolvajärvi was no longer just a crossing. It was a question. Could a small nation dictate the terms of engagement against a superpower? The answer was about to be written in blood and snow. And once written, it could never be erased.